Welcome to the Sanctus podcast. It's a first today, so we're having a roundtable discussion on masculinity, mental health. We've got 4 blokes in the room. And anything that comes with that, basically. It's the first time we've done this on Sanctus, so we'll see. If you need to shout over each other and bang on the table, guys, that's absolutely fine. Always difficult to start introductions when talking about mental health because it feels like everything's going to be a 20-minute or an hour-long deluge. But I just wanted to start by go around the room, introduce yourselves, and I suppose like why we're here, really. Try and keep it short, and then we'll dive straight into the conversation. I'll start. I'm James, and I suppose I'm actually here talk about mental health a lot. You know, host this podcast, talk constantly about mental health every day. But I suppose the topic of masculinity and what it kind of means to be a man and how that's affected me and my mental health is pretty new to me, to be honest. We did a podcast with a guy called Mark LaRousse the other day on this topic, and then we did the second part of the podcast where we talked and kind of debriefed it, and one of our coaches was there called Ben, and he talked about how actually a lot of what he sees in masculinity is immature masculinity and a lot of men acting like boys, and that's about as far as I've got with my own journey, and because that just really resonated with me, and it made me think a lot about my own actions as a man, essentially, or even if I am a man, to be honest. So that's kind of where I'm at. So Jack, I wonder if you could do a little bit of that as well.
So basically my name's Jack. I've volunteered for various mental health charities over the years. I've noticed there's definitely like a growing awareness now of basically the effect of masculinity it has on mental health, obviously with Coronation Street, with the whole suicide storyline. So basically it's very such a growing topic. People are finally getting awareness of it now. Basically, I've just always been interested. I've had mental health problems. You know, it's mainly to do with you've always been brought up with you are a man. You know, you've got to be strong. You've got to be tough. All the connotations of being a man, and raising awareness of no matter what gender you are, there's going to be mental health issues.
Yeah, cool.
My name is Nathan. I guess I'm here kind of selfishly to learn more from everyone else. But I think I'm also interested in the fact that I think it's things that people don't realise how much social norms can affect you, and it's kind of that unconscious element which I'm kind of interested in. I think everyone is kind of on a mission to kind of break down these things that are negatively affecting them, and I kind of want to learn a bit more about that and learn more about myself as well, and how I can maybe like operate a bit better and be kind of healthier as well.
Cool.
My name's Carl. I was diagnosed with illness anxiety disorder in 2013. So basically means that I convince myself I've got cancer every 5 minutes, even though I definitely don't. But actually that's not the thing that I struggle with in like the topic around masculinity. It's actually, for me, is I've spent 20 years of my life in 2 very inherently masculine domains. One is sport and the other one is tech. And a lot of the expectations of being man in those environments have never really sat well with me. The expectations of how you should operate. And it's only in the past, I'd say like 2-3 years, where I've really had confidence in to operate in the way that I feel is totally natural, that doesn't necessarily conform to these kind of like archaic ideals. So for me, is to kind of share about my experience and how I've got to this point, but at the same time, definitely hear some more stories too.
And everyone, pretty much everyone's touched on, like, and I did as well, like these kind of norms. So like it sounds to me like there are some norms that aren't quite right, essentially, that exist kind of socially and culturally, but maybe don't quite fit. So I'm just intrigued from you guys, and maybe jump in whoever wants to. What are those norms right now to you guys? What does it currently mean to be a man?
The things that I continually like are around are kind of wealth and status, sexism and like the treatment and power over women, and then the final thing is probably what was I going to say? The third thing is and then like violence and physicality. Those kind of like 3 areas kind of like construct this like environment or this guise of like you're supposed to conform, and actually in each of those instances it is all about this kind of like where you are in this kind of pecking order, which feels batshit, when you think about it. even just in the ways of, I mean, we were talking about it before the podcast started, this idea of like power plays, right? The two hands on the boardroom table, like we see that so much, and that's an inherently masculine trait that is a way of trying to assert dominance within a room. This isn't just violence as far as like domestic abuse. This is like the ways in which we as men operate in order to try and navigate social situations, right?
What about you guys?
Yeah, I was going to say I think that's it. It's like you say, navigating. It's like the social norm is there and it's set as a precedent, and as you get older, it's like how you're learning throughout your life, how do I navigate this society and this culture I'm living in? And I guess you're faced with a choice of like, do you conform to like this general thing, or do you like go against that? And something I've been thinking about is either way it's a difficult situation, because let's say you're getting like a cognitive dissonance for like not upholding this kind of like general construct, and then you're kind of outside of that. But even if you do, you're constantly measuring yourself against something as well. So I think, yeah, it's interesting, but I think it's another, like, masculinity is another social construct along with many other social constructs. Just happens to be the one which is kind of, the gender stereotype one, kind of the kind of flip side of feminism as well, but I guess it's the one that's less talked about now, potentially. But it's kind of...
I'd say from an LGBT point of view, masculinity especially, you see in a lot of, like, especially mass days, like mass for mass basically, that there is a lot of inherent internalised homophobia that's brought about from like the social norms brought about by masculinity.
Yeah.
Like, you see so many people, you see it in the media, for example, that you see, like, especially in the sports industry, tech industry, it's all, how masculine can you be? You see there's such a, in like the rugby at the moment, you don't see any kind of, gay people. Obviously there's a few people who've come out, but there's still that internalised stigma, isn't there?
Yeah.
So especially, I think there's been examples of, in football, for example, like one player's come out as gay, and they get like rants on the field, for example.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it basically sounds like, I mean, one of the definite things that to be a man is straight for a start, strong, earning money, like kind of powerful, strong in many different ways in terms of wealth and status, but also in terms of like, I think the other one that comes up for me, I think in terms of, I think, an image that we've maybe been sold over the last few years is a certain way of looking, like a certain body type as well. Just interested in you mentioned the media and sports. Where else are we seeing, like, what in your lives maybe, what other images and stuff do you think have played a part in creating this stereotype? Sport I definitely see, the kind of the
you see it in the business world, really. Like, you'd never see female CEOs pretty much, see you. It's always the man who's on top, the man who's worked hard. It's never the woman, it's always the man who works hard, the man who runs a company, the man who has the secretaries who are always stereotypically women who are working for them.
Yeah, business.
Yeah, I guess it's just like whatever media you're tuning into, and I think historically it's like been print and advertising, and now again there's been a big shift of that, where it's like people are, at least like the younger generation, shifting more towards like social media as a means of getting information, which is something I just thought was interesting, which is, you mentioned like what you look like. Well, I think historically that kind of print media is like the muscly man, but then if you say like wealth, power and status, you could say like a successful CEO like Mark Zuckerberg is not like your typical like masculine man, but certainly he's like very well accomplished now, and people can look up to him as he's a successful guy. And maybe there's these kind of new stereotypes forming of like the kind of like successful tech guy who maybe is like masculine in some of those traits, but they're not others. And then all these things, I think they're interesting. It's how it's kind of reshaping our perception of what it means to be that. But that ties into the information thing, because it's people are getting their information from different sources these days. But for me, I don't really tune into like the news or that much. I try and avoid as much advertising as possible, like not watching any like TV adverts, things like that. But that's where people kind of get this like heuristic or like stereotype, which is like what's presented in advertising. But social media would be the other big one these days when people get in that.
And you mentioned, Carl, that you in the tech world and the sports world that you've been really affected by that stereotype. So what was it in both of those worlds for you?
I mean, like one of the most like pertinent times was like varsity like rugby at university, right? Where it's like you're there for 3-4 years, where it's like drink as much as you can, sleep with as many women as you can, like never go to lectures, like this kind of like the notion of what it means to be like a young guy who goes to university. And what varsity sport kind of bolts on top of that is this kind of like really like tribal kind of primitive chest thumping, like asserting dominance over women, like misogyny, sexism, racism, like there's all of these undertones in what is intended to be this kind of like quite jokey way, especially the notion of like rape jokes and rape culture, all of that stuff like played in a really funny way. And like I can't sit here and say that I never operated in those spaces and contributed to that stuff, right? Like that's something that just like every guy at some point has. But actually the fact that it's never ever felt right, like it's never sat well with me. And there'd be times where like people would consciously see that I didn't feel comfortable contributing to that. But then actually finding coming out the back end of that, like even though was taken out of that environment, still finding myself like playing up to that as a way of trying to now operate the world of work. So it's like, I got introduced to someone via a rugby mate for a job, and then it's like, and then suddenly you're just carrying on that narrative. And so I think that if it hadn't have been for the fact that I've got like 3 amazing, strong women around me in my family, like I've got an older and a younger sister, and then obviously my mum, and actually a super emotionally intelligent, like heart on your sleeve sort of dad, then actually that would have probably been me like set and done. Like I'd have been off on that route and think that being a man is all of those things, right? But actually it's kind of like having that as a sounding board, and actually just like being open-minded about kind of changing and being and growing and being different, right? Now don't get me wrong, it means that in many instances it means losing friends, it means like calling other guys out on their shit, like all of these things which inherently cause kind of friction and difficulty. But like I just believe that society's changing, and like actually I'm going to be on the right side of society by doing that, and those other guys won't.
Yeah. Have you seen a change like from you leaving university to those peers that you're around in like that society, or like that group of rugby lads? Have they changed their attitudes?
Yeah, I think like there's a maturity thing, right? Like everyone grows up. And especially when you realise that kind of like behaviour or those jokes don't fly at work, like for as one, right? But actually, like the change you see in people when they become a father, like they have a daughter, and then suddenly it's like, hang on a minute, like suddenly like you're responsible for this young woman and her experience in life, and you're like, I hope she never meets a guy like I was when I was at university, you know. And so I think there is like a growth thing, but also I feel like when I was at university, it also felt like this kind of peak of like what I call like links culture, where it was like FHM, all of these like really old institutions of masculinity.
Did you feel pressured to conform to all those kind of stereotypical university norms?
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah. I think for me it's like not only did I feel compelled to, but I happily settled into it, right? It's like actually I just embraced it and accepted it. Yeah. And actually when I was made captain of the university rugby team, I actually even dialed it up. Like I felt like I had to do that. Like that's an extra level of status and power that meant that people were looking for me to be like how do you operate in this space, right? Yeah. And don't get me wrong, it's like for me, like I still don't think it was ever like I always like my values still came through in that, right? Where it's like I still tried to make it like an inclusive space. Like I still tried, and whether maybe not consciously at the time, like the idea of being inclusive probably wasn't top of the radar, but like for people who are maybe more introverted, people who are a bit more shy, like lacking a bit of confidence, like always trying to make a space where people felt safe, but never aware of actually like doing that is not making people like feel comfortable or safe. It's all of this other shit that you obtain and maintain that actually doesn't make it a very inclusive place after all. You know?
It's as you're talking, it's like it's reminding me a lot of some of the similar stuff that I've been through. Like before Sanctus, like I was like one of the the captain of the ship, like first name down for a night out, like pushing for like let's go out on a Friday and like you know, 10 beers and doing all day the next day, you know, they're like proud of how many women we all got with, and like all of that sort of stuff. So I was all for that in many ways. Like I was pushing the kind of this toxic construct of a man. I was like being one, and I think in my head at the time I was starting a business, or around that time I had this image of like what a guy or a man looked like, and it was kind of like, it was honestly, it's embarrassing to admit this, it was honestly based off like Wolf of Wall Street. Like it was honestly based off like, you know, let's get up early, get in the gym for 6:30, get into work early, make a load of money, and go out and like in expensive places and drink loads. And I must admit, like one thing, I'm sitting here, I'm almost feeling a bit of like ashamed of that I've played a part in that. But have not ever been, because you know I that was who I wanted to be, that, and I thought that was the right thing. And I suppose at the time I didn't even know it was wrong. I didn't know what I was doing, not only to myself, because eventually 3 years down the line, you know, the anxiety came because there was a lot of friction within me about the person I was being and the person I wanted to be. And then so it hurt myself, but it probably hurt others as well. You know, I know I was like the kind of guy to rib my mates hard and like take the piss out of my mates, you know, because that's what we did. So it's I know I've played a part in that. So
I think the important thing that you've just nailed on is the fact, mentioned by the fact that you're inspired by film as well, right? Like I think that like we've alluded to like advertising and all that sort of stuff, but like we have lifestyle or expectation of who we are and what we should be, whether it's how we look and how we operate and what we do and how much we earn and all that sort of stuff. It's shoved in our face every single day, and it's basically unavoidable. So yeah, like I'm kind of like you, like I'm ashamed of the way which I kind of was operating, but also know that like the human brain is a really, really sensitive thing that we really don't understand. And actually, if you're shown enough images of something and made to believe that that's something that you actually want, then actually like you'll accept that as your reality. Which for me, it reinforces the reasons why actually we need more and more men like empathetic, understanding, open-minded, challenging the notions of toxic masculinity in some of these major brands, in some of these major publications. And actually, in fact, not even just men, we need more and more just like inherently diverse ranges of people, right? In these places which are starting to construct this narrative. Because ultimately it's because there's this archaic mentality in all of these places of power that means that we're just getting fed the same shit.
Yeah. So we've got this archaic kind of view of what a man looks like, and it sounds to me like everyone or each of us in some way have started to have friction against that stereotype. You know, it's like you're trying to put on this jacket that you're supposed to wear, and it just feels shocking. I'm interested in you two in particular. Where's the friction been for you?
I'd say before I came out as dating, like secondary school, so before the age of 16, there was always a kind of school culture of you've got to be straight, you've got to conform to the male point of view, you've got to play football, you've got to play sports, you've got to hang around with the lads. Even though I tried to deny it, I still ended up hanging around with loads of girls, and I still was like, oh no, I'm straight. And then the moment you get to college, you're like, you know, well, actually, I am gay. You know, I don't want to conform to the stereotypical male point of view. You know, I am who I am. Like, I don't want to conform to these toxic stereotypes of, oh, I am a straight man. Obviously, there's still certain aspects that you kind of absorb over time, but you end up, especially with basic masculinity, especially if you're a young person growing up, you're exposed to heteronormative culture. You are literally just absorbed and you're just told that's not right. You're not given any examples. I know there's a growing, growing realisation now that especially in terms of representation in the media, there is literally like a growing sense of more trans people, more gay people. Where growing up in 2000 in boring old Essex, you was literally just told, oh, you're a man, you have to conform to these certain stereotypes. You must be the way it's been interpreted.
And how did that affect you?
It's basically in terms of my friend Louis, who obviously know through Vic, he was always gay, but there was two different ways of it. So there was, you kind of rebelled against it. So you was a gay teenager, but you was open about it, and you was really as camp as possible. Put makeup on just to kind of shock the straight people, and the abuse that would come would be horrific. There was a time at my secondary school where this kid was literally he was out as gay, and he went into a chip shop and kids just beat him up because he was gay. It was brought up in that culture, where there was also the other side of, oh, I'm gay, but I don't want people to know, so I will just pretend to be straight. And then the moment you get out of the secondary school culture and you realise there's no hierarchy in college, or not in my college anyway, that you kind of realise you can be who as you are, in my opinion anyway.
Yeah, interesting to say that. I think that's like those different stages of like senior school, college, university.
Yeah.
Kind of different phases where you can kind of like shift in out these like groups identities, and you can see shifts in people throughout those. I think on that point, I've felt that I've kind of gone against, I guess not it's any sort of social norm, not necessarily exclusive to masculinity, but I went to a pretty bad state school, and I guess like I kind of for some whatever reason kind of targeted there, and like had a few different groups of friends. I was never like, I didn't have like one central group of friends. I think most people go through and have like as a core group all the way along. I kind of had like one guy who I was like really good friends with, and we kind of like stuck together the whole of kind of school. And then like I think it was interesting, like years 10 and 11, like everyone kind of like settled down a little bit and you make kind of different friends. But I was definitely like going against social norms there, and then in college I think everything became a little bit more relaxed and more different. But I think that the jacket that you're talking about wasn't necessarily masculinity, it was just sort of any sort of norm, and I think I've been kind of a lone wolf my whole life. So yeah, it's interesting like questioning all these norms, but then I think if I haven't identified with anything, like what identity points have I taken on? You know, I think that's another reason why I kind of I'm interested to jump into the conversation. It's like, what do we not know that we are doing every day, which is like a social norm? And how do we like question those things? And then a part of the way I do that actually, like on a daily basis, is like question like the information sources I'm taking in. So you're saying like you're kind of bombarded with this media, and I've like over the last probably 3 years I've tried to really cut down like what are my media inputs that are actually affecting my beliefs, values, and ultimately behaviours. And I think certainly like in university, like a lot of your inputs, like your peers around you, you kind of like absorb a lot of other people's beliefs, and then that's that kind of like toxic kind of feedback cycle of maybe some of these bad kind of.
I feel like what a lot of we're talking about is masculinity is obviously a big part of it, but it's kind of just fitting in general. It's like the need to fit in, and I know through school, like having mates is like a big part of school. You want to have mates, you want to fit in, you want to be part of a group, you want to belong somewhere. And I'm going to be really honest here. I used to lie a little bit at school. Like I would tell the odd lie about like what I'd done or what I'd not done, just to kind of fit in. Like I remember I think I lied about getting with girls at a really young age. Like you know, when there was that whole age of like who's got with girls sooner, like the race to get with girls. Which was utterly ridiculous, but anyway. And I think I also I remember for me, and I'm sure it's so subjective to each school. I remember like at school, you know, like one part of being a boy or a lad was kind of like at my group anyway. It was obviously like being a bit naughty, like that was like cool, like not being. And I was a bit of a geek, like I really loved like getting high grades and working out and stuff. So I remember once I stayed in at lunchtime to work on this piece of coursework, and my mates asked me where I'd been, and I said I'd been in detention. I just lied. I was like, because I'm so like rogue, you know. And I think a lot of this to me seems to be about a sense of like wanting to belong at school or outside of that in the workplace or whatever. So I don't know if that resonant, like if that's true.
Yeah, I think it comes to the status point again, right? Where it's just like actually we're made to believe that like by possessing these ideals and being aligned with other people who possess those ideals, that gives us power and status above other, basically. Whether that's consciously and subconsciously, like the fact that everyone always talks about like, oh, there's like the nerds and there's like the cool kids, right? Do you know what I mean? And it's just like, and I always remember being like this round little ball of a nerd, like who always wanted to hang out with the cool kids. And the shit you do to try and fit in, like getting fights, like, or go and like start on like the kids in the year above, like anything that would assert to give you more power, more status, all of these things which you're never thinking at the time, well, how do I acquire more power and status? Actually, you're just thinking like, how do I align with these people who clearly have influence and power in this dimension?
Yeah, interesting. I wouldn't necessarily jump in and say it's straight power or status. I think it's kind of identifying with a specific group. It's just like, I think, being in a part of the group that you want to be part of. And I think, I don't know, for me it was like, I had one friend, like, I had others, but then it was like, that's that one guy who's a very good friend that's throughout, and that was my group. Everyone has their other little clusters. And it's how can you be part of the acceptable identity within that group. And it's the identity point I think is interesting, because it's when you're young, you don't really know what your identity is. Like, you're starting to learn who you are and like, you know, what things you like to do. And that's why kind of later in life, once you know your identity, you kind of know who your friends are and like where you fit in. But it's like, when your identity is malleable, that's when you can like adopt these other like beliefs or behaviors, things like that. And change it out. But yeah, I guess I wouldn't necessarily say that like, I don't think necessarily everyone's thinking like power and status. I think maybe I would more think it would be like, because they're like traits, but it's like, I think I would say more identity. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, like I agree, but I think the important part, like, of the nerds cool kids dynamic is the cool kids will be the first to pick on the nerds. Like, the nerds would never be throwing any fire or throwing any shit at the cool kids. For me, when you like look at it, if you like think about your textbook cool kid or your textbook nerd at school, like, I can bet you any money that your textbook nerd would have more inherently feminine traits versus more masculine traits. Being a bit
femininity and masculinity.
But it's like our broadly accepted understanding or identification of what we believe those things are the things that kind of form those natural groups. And the fact that there was people like me that still felt this desire and need to be accepted, embraced within the other one, was part of this construct and narrative where I wanted to be seen as more masculine versus as more feminine.
Yeah. What do you reckon, Jack?
I'm going to say, on the subject of identity, basically I kind of, you know, when you remember when you kind of picked up an idea, it always reminded me of, like, especially American TV shows, like you brought up watching Nickelodeon, Fox Kids. It was always, say for example, Saved by the Bell. It was always the tall, pretty people, and they were represented as, like, you know, beautiful, like mainly ripped. You know, even though they're a lot older than you kind of still absorb that. The nerds are always portrayed as they're a lower person, where basically those products basically made out like, if you are a popular person, you are higher. You are the best person you can be. Where if you're a nerd, you're at the bottom of the pile. You are not good enough to be accepted in your social hierarchy.
And how does this like, it sounds like everyone here has maybe had like a journey almost with their masculinity, identity, a sense of who they are. How, you know, how's this playing into now? I feel like we've touched on maybe touched on childhood and school and how that plays into it. Like, what's the effect now? I know for me, one thing that kind of was very new for me was talking about mental health, right? So like, actually talking about mental health was an inherently sort of rare and unique thing for a guy to do. So that was something for me which like showed a completely different side of myself, and I suppose that's one of the most nervous I've ever been, because I felt like it risked me like having any friends. Like, I thought people were just gonna like shun me essentially. So I'm just curious to know like right now, like how maybe you're trying to live your life now, like what's that balance?
I feel like I've changed a little bit now, because before, say around 4 years ago, I had mental health issues, but I wouldn't admit it to myself because I was a man. And so I feel there's a bit of a growing realisation now that people can actually talk about it. But when you had like symptoms, anxieties, symptoms of depression, you wouldn't feel like you could talk to anyone because you have to be this. Basically, you have to be a strong man who has to conform to social stereotypes. And it feels like even going to a therapist or a doctor, you feel like because you're a man, you are doing something wrong because you are going to someone for help for your mental health.
And was that the need to feel strong specifically?
Yeah.
That you think held you back?
I feel like you've always been brought up with you are a man, you have to be strong. Like, you know, you have to be the top like if you're a father in your family, you have to be on top. I know loads of fathers who have ended up being sectioned, for example, because they've not acknowledging their mental health. They're 60 years old because they've been brought up on that archaic view. So
yeah, I think having this kind of constantly questioning kind of what is a normal trait, like what's the identity that we should be kind of looking up to and aspiring to, constantly questioning that, I guess being a lone wolf kind of throughout these periods and not just trying to not wear those jackets and not be forced to wear those jackets kind of has maybe made it easier to do like a non-traditional career path, I think is the word reflect on that. And yeah, just like I guess developing a lens of like constantly analysing kind of what are these things that we're kind of always being kind of thrown at and analysing that. I guess also like always trying to kind of be more informed on those topics. But do you think, like you said, it was in college when you kind of changed your view on that and decided to just kind of be more transparent about it? Do you think like going through that, and that's like, I don't know, is that kind of an early phase? I guess it sounds kind of.
I feel like it's had more of a positive effect. So I feel like, say for example, you know now you have to stay at school till you're 18 because you don't end up staying in the same school. I feel like would still probably have the same kind of hierarchy.
Right.
I feel like because you have physically moved from school to college, that you just get a realisation, it just hits you that there's actually no hierarchy in college. There shouldn't be a hierarchy anyway, but you just have that interpretation installed that everyone has their levels. There's either top people, middle people, or bottom people. And in college everyone is just separate subgroups. No, everyone's based on the same level.
Yeah, it's more flat. More
flat. You don't realise that.
And we brought mental health into the mix. And you mentioned, you know, for you when you were struggling, you felt like you couldn't talk because you needed to be strong.
Yeah.
Blah 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 blah. Let's go off the notion we've all got mental health, as we talk about all the time. So everyone here and in this room and in the world essentially has mental health.
Yeah.
For anyone else, like for you guys, do you think being a man and conditioned in the way of being has stopped you talking about your feelings, essentially, or talking about your mental health specifically?
I actually know for me. So when I first was diagnosed with anxiety in 2013, I knew and felt compelled to share it. Like for whatever reason, I felt like this is something I want to share, but I didn't want to just like go, oh hey, I've got anxiety, by the way. So I actually ended up basically like writing like a piece of creative writing. It was like a short story about me going to get a scan on basically like my man regions. And it was done with like a really comedic twist, and like it's meant to be really light-hearted, but with a view to sort of saying like, hey, like actually this is like important stuff. And the crazy like positive reaction that I got to that, and the number of people who reached out and said, oh my god, I suffer too, and all that sort of stuff, just transformed my worldview, right? It was just like suddenly going, oh my god, there's so many other people who suffer. Like that was like for me this really stark kind of reality of it being normal in many ways, right? And actually what that's done is that's kind of set me off on what I believe is like this path of like real vulnerability, where I'm really comfortable and confident talking about my emotions and how I'm feeling. In the past 2 years of trying to build a startup, I used like my Instagram as a way of like keeping my friends and family, like people close to me, up to date, and would never shy away from if I wanted to crying on like my Instagram stories and all that sort of stuff. Which for me like was never seen as this like kind of cry for attention, even though as someone I know I inherently like craves attention. Actually for me is just as much about reinforcing people like that this is me when I'm doing good, right? Like actually if I'm not crying or sharing how I'm feeling, then that's actually probably like a worse situation. So the idea of reaffirming that the norm is me sharing emotions whether I'm happy or sad.
Had you always done that? Or did it take the scan on the nether regions to do that?
I think it was the nether region scan. There was a lot of gel. I think that was like the one thing, but in great honesty, I felt like that really came to a fore in in two stages. One was when I first joined my last company, Us2, which is obviously where Sanctus lives, which was a company where I felt like I could be my whole self.
Okay.
The second one was then when I decided to become an entrepreneur, and suddenly knew that the values of this company and this business were really important to me, and inclusion was something that I placed kind of right at the top. I was like, right, how do I reaffirm to people or operate with absolute authenticity and integrity aligned with this idea of like, you can be your full self and this is an inclusive space? Well, I'm like, well, I've just got to put it all out there and believe that will kind of resonate with the people that matter.
Because I can remember a specific example where I think the way I've been conditioned, and I'm not blaming my environment here, led me to not talk about my feelings. I remember when I was feeling at my worst, where I just had a constant kind of like fluttering in the chest, my hands were constantly sweaty, I just had a knot in my stomach, so I was feeling very anxious at this point, like the height of my anxiety. Like if it was some sort of like pressure gauge, it would have been like into the kind of red zone. And I remember being in the car, I'd moved out of London, I was living at home, because I was in like a career break. And I remember being in the back of the car, and I told my mum, my mum's a nurse, and on the day I'd been like, Mum, like, I swear my heart is like beating at like a crazy rate. She's a nurse, she did the whole like check your pulse, and she was like, it's absolutely fine, to be honest. And I was like, well, yeah, you're obviously not doing your job right, okay. And I remember being in the car, my mum saying like, do you want us to take you to the doctors? And the answer should have been yes. And I remember just 3 times going, no, I'm fine. No, I'm fine. No. And I'm like, it was like a robot was saying that. You know, I'm not blaming anything, but like for me, like I was obviously, that was just my default response. Like, no,
would
fine.
you say that in terms of especially disclosing to family and friends that there was some kind of barrier? Because I've always felt it like apart from my dad, I've not really disclosed to like my nan about my mental health issues or anything like that, and I'm quite close to her. Do you feel like there's some kind of like barrier in terms of like disclosing to your family?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say so. I think, yeah, even when you guys are saying that now, it's interesting because I'm obviously like reflecting like my own experience. I think, yeah, I also think I have a tendency to kind of, I guess everyone does it on the spectrum, but just to kind of shut off. Like when things come hard, you end up just kind of like closing down. And
yeah.
I think like in reflection, I think I go through kind of like certain cyclical phases, and like maybe it's just because I know it, like because it's cyclical, like certainly I'll come out the other point and it'll be a certain phase, and then like I'll be able to operate again, it'll be fine. But I guess it's the time when it becomes like kind of too much, and then you just kind of aren't really aware of like how much it will hit at a certain time. Yeah. That's that kind of gauge. But yeah, I think I loosely talked to like some of the close people around me about, you know, how much a certain thing is affecting me. But I think on the whole, it's that interesting phase of like we don't know how much we've been conditioned to like hold certain things back throughout life. But yeah, I think
for me, what's fascinating with my family, to kind of share personally about that, is that the mental health issues are quite rife actually, right, in my family. Not to kind of call anyone out specifically, but there's actually quite a lot of history. But I think just because of, it's not an ignorance, I think it's just a lack of knowledge and understanding. It's just not talked about.
Do you feel there's a feeling of shame as well?
Maybe, yeah. To be honest, but I just honestly just think it's just naivety to the gravity of the subjects. I genuinely, you know, yeah. Obviously, there's lots of feelings of shame and emotions attached to any anything to do with mental health, but it's just not talked about, and I genuinely don't think that's through an active choice. I just think that's the way it is. Like it's not talked about. So I think for me, when I started to feel like, I don't think I've ever throughout my childhood or life been kind of trained on how to feel and like how to articulate feelings. Like it's a skill. Like 2 years into building a business that's solely related on mental health, and I work alongside coaches and therapists every single day. The level at which I can like notice how I feel, like think about it on my own and be like, okay, that's that, because it's associated with this feeling in my body, and then talk about it is so much greater than where it was, because I just don't think I've ever had that training. So when I started to feel weird, which was the only word at the time I could use to describe it, and my mum said, do you want to go and talk to someone? I said, no, I'm fine.
Was
that
you just
just the
that
default response?
emotional intelligence? Is that what you'd kind of relate that to?
I think it's all. I think emotional intelligence, self-awareness, mental health. I feel like it's all kind of put it in one big pot and stir it around. You know, it's all kind of a similar thing. It just doesn't exist. You know, at school, there's just nothing proactive there. People have to be educated on that, or else how would we know?
I think a lot about, and you won't mind me talking about it. My dad, early last year, me and him, over the Christmas period, we were just butting heads. For whatever reason, he just would snap at me or whatever happened. Anyway, I knew that something wasn't right. And anyway, it was 3-4 months later that actually my dad had lost one of his biggest clients. He's a entrepreneur himself, runs this kind of content production company. His biggest client, most of his billings, that meant he had to let people go, and suddenly he was oh, actually, you'll have to take Sky Sports off the Sky package, that, to that level of granularity. You're thinking actually we need to think smartly about finances, and eventually got him to talk, basically, where it's just in me and knowing how what's helped me and what's been valuable to me, chipping away at it. Anyway, it's gets to the point where he starts talking about, he talks about darkness, he talks about he feels like he's grieving, and it's all of these things which are associated with depression, right? And so in getting him to talk about it and getting more confident with it, and actually giving him the nudge to talk to his mates about it when he goes and plays golf, instead of pretending that it's all lads, banter, manages to kind of pull himself back away and get himself back on a good and even keel. But I honestly think it's his proximity to me and seeing how I operate that has supported him in that process. I don't think enough generations older have that kind of privilege in many ways. There's this kind of, I suppose, mentality of I've done all my growing up, I'm as wise as I'll ever be, so why change type thing. And so for me it's but by me being who I am, has it facilitated and enabled me to have a better conversation with my family, basically.
That's great. Yeah, I think it's exactly what you're saying. It's it lets people have permission. So I think it's great what you're doing at Sanctus, because the more you hear people talk about it, it's it gives people permission to okay, I'm kind of interested in this as well.
That is a really great story, Carl. Thanks for sharing that. It's interesting as you shared it, because before that I was thinking I need to talk about the dads and the granddads, because that older generation of men and women, and older generation in general, surely are playing a big part in this conversation. They're not in the room with us, but they're in the room because they're, my dad's relationship with his dad lives on through me, as it does with all of us. So where's that come? Has that come up for you in particular? You mentioned your dad.
I feel I've had quite a strenuous relationship with my dad. Basically, bad identity. So my mum died when I was 10, so it's just me and him, and he's very, very masculine. Goes to football, supports West Ham, and then there's me, little feminine Jack, doing own little gay things here and there. So I feel our relationship is quite weird, because when I first came out as gay, he chucked me out of the house, went mental, but also he drunkenly once said to me that he admires the fact that I've turned around and been okay, it's set me with who I am. No one else in the family is going to accept you for being an ignorant person, and I think he kind of admires me for the fact that I've turned around and been, no, I'm sticking to my guns. I am who I am. Deal with it.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's pretty hard to get thrown out of the house.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
I mean, I stole the dog straight after. So I broke in and was I'm taking Toby, see you later.
But I love the fact that he's, even though it's taken him booze to give him the confidence to do it, the reason he said that is because he sees strength. That is him. It's not the version of strength that he's used to, but he's going hang on a minute, he's actually really strong-willed and actually standing by his values and standing by who he is, and so that's actually the thing that shows that is real strength, that level of vulnerability, right?
Yeah, I feel it took him to break through the stereotypical masculinity barrier and kind of realise that his views need to change in a little way. Even though, obviously, when I lived at home, we did butt heads, but that's because, you live at home with your parents, sometimes you don't get on.
We all do, right?
We all do, yeah. So I feel now that I live in London and he lives back in Essex, I went to see him for Father's Day yesterday, got on really well. Where it's just, so masculinity's definitely had a major part in our relationship. It's definitely had a case of, so basically, it's made our relationship quite strenuous, but it's also made him realise he needs to back down that barrier and realise that times are changing. Mental health needs to be talked about, because it's going to be toxic if every single man in the world withholds like disclosing their feelings.
Yeah, and I think it's one thing that I've learned kind of recently in my kind of journey in the last two, I hate the word journey, in the last 2 years, has been that just an acknowledgement that like my dad, for example, is just from a completely different generation, and I'm not gonna change him overnight. Like, he's not gonna he's not gonna do yoga and all that. Like, he might need to for his hip, but it would be great. But they're from a different generation, and there's sort of an acknowledge and an appreciation that, you know, my dad and every person's got their own story too. You know, they've been through their own certain stuff which has affected them in a certain way. I feel like we've heard like a lot of stories, and like we've kind of delved into each other maybe more than we kind of expected. One of the questions that I really wanted to ask, because I get it asked all the time, is, we know it's not true that men can't talk about their feelings. We're doing it now, great role models here, you three. However, it is true that men seem to be more unlikely to. And one of the things that I've noticed is that women seem to create more environments where they do that. Just naturally, it's just more environment, better at communicating, keeping in touch. And so I suppose my question is, what do we think as kind of 4 guys in a room is the best way to start to encourage guys and men to open up and to have those conversations? And are there any examples from where you've had an open conversation with, you know, with a friend or a family member about your feelings of mental health? Like, how do we do it, basically? How do we encourage it?
I mean, I'm actually the past 2 months have been like really interesting for me, off the back of like finishing a company and basically driving myself physically, emotionally, mentally to rock bottom. And as an aside to that, one of my best friends took his own life. No explanation why, but like had the life and left us. And in that kind of environment, feeling like, well, I kind of want to like get off my chest what I've been through, and talk about that with my friends, because I think it's one of those things where it feels hard to talk about. But at the same time, also, I would hate to believe that any of my friends are going through what one of my other friend was going through, and actually want to create a space. And so actually, like 2 months ago, I just started this dinner where it was like 8 men, all basically strangers. And they basically gave them permission. They come to this table to be able to just like forget about being a man for a few hours. And so the idea is that they can, first and foremost, they can come totally anonymous, as it were. Like, there's no obligation to share who they are, what they do, or any of that sort of stuff. There's no alcohol, so it's like, actually, like, if you're going to hear and you're going to contribute and you're going to talk, like, it's not because this is giving you confidence, it's because you're actually there to talk. But then the final thing is, like, there's this spectrum of like people who I know. I mean, I've kind of curated the table, as it were, like people who I know have attempted suicide, and they talk quite openly about the fact that they've attempted suicide, versus young 19-year-old lads who have seen how I operate online, and they're like, I really want to talk about my feelings, but I kind of don't know how.
So you've created a dedicated space, really.
Basically,
like, let's centre it around food.
Yeah, no, like, for me, like, but do you know what? Like, there's something about, for me, like, I think about the notion of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs and stuff, right? Where it's just like, actually, like, food is an inherently social experience. Like, it is nourishing and supporting us as just being a person. And so actually, there's something, this idea of over breaking bread, that kind of feels, it kind of facilitates that.
And what served you well when you needed to kind of open up and talk to people? Like, what environment made you feel kind of safe, essentially?
I think is other people feeling it's as easy to talk about this stuff as I am, right? For example, like in the context of our last dinner, like, there's the lads who were struggling to find the tools. They see these like 2-3 lads actually having like a really in-depth conversation about suicide, and kind of normalising it, and that, and kind of give those folks permission to go, oh, actually, like, I did think something that looked or felt like a suicidal thought once. And it's until you see another man talking to another man about this stuff that actually, that's what kind of opens your mind a bit, or broadens your horizons, as it were.
Yeah, and Nath, you mentioned at the start that you I think it's fair to say you were like, I'm kind of starting out. I'm here to kind of learn and reflect and like, you know, maybe put your first foot on that journey. What, you know, as someone who's, you know, what has this been easy for you to just like start riffing about your feelings and your mental health?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess like it's interesting. I do feel like I do have some barriers that I didn't even realise. But yeah, I think I've also got like a small group of strong friends that like we're very close and we talk about everything. And similarly, like I think we're all connected to someone who's like been through like some kind of deep struggles, and then we've tried to help them through that, and then you start to have those conversations. And I've got a friend who, like tried to take his own life, and then we kind of helped him through that, and then through those conversations, like they branch out more conversations, and then everyone.
And did you talk about that as a group when that happens?
It was me and another friend who like went and like kind of helped him out, and then. Yeah, then it was people start having conversations separately about that. But I think, certainly it's been normalised to have those conversations in our groups, and it's not like there's no like stigma around that. It's just like I think we also appreciate that this is quite a new time to be like our age with like social media and all these new pressures, like that actually the previous generation like didn't have like. You know, the concept of like holding yourself against the number of likes you get on like a photo, all these sort of things, which actually affect us more than we think, I think, as well. So I think, I had more of those conversations, and I think, I'm also like, you hear the word journey, but I'm on a journey to like, you know, kind of break down those barriers more, and then see how I can kind of be a bit more, I don't think I'm necessarily closed by it, but I think, yeah, I've said it 100 times here, but I think we don't realise how much we're like kind of influenced by all the things around us and perceptions of that.
I feel like there is definitely a growing shift now though, like especially with like the recent Coronation Street storyline with Aidan taking his own life. That was portrayed quite well, and I feel like people are more open, personalities are changing, and I think that's the main root of how everything's going to change. You need to get people to talk, whether it's in like, you know, the workplace or whether it's just in the personal environment. In my previous job, we all kind of had a management kind of style of, oh, you can talk to me whenever you want, it's no problem. Where in a lot of older, like more archaic companies, it was kind of, oh, you go to the HR person, where they have to abide by generic HR rules where you can't just be personal and just chat to someone whether they want to talk.
Sounds to me like there's almost two things, like a willingness to have the conversation. You got to get yourself to the space. You got to go to the dinner party, or you got to create the environment and be willing to. You got to take a bit of a risk as well. To have the conversation, you got to take the risk. And I think as men, typically good at pushing themselves, being competitive, taking risks. I think this is one area that sounds like guys could really do with taking more risks, be more vulnerable, sharing more feelings, and having that conversation. And I just want to say thank you so much to you three for kind of role modelling, I think, to be honest, of how we can do it as guys. There's no beer. We're just having a sober, watered conversation about mental health, and I've really enjoyed it, and I feel a little bit better, and I feel like I've explored my own masculinity a bit more. So cheers, guys.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Cut. God, I'm hot.
I'm sweating.